Hi, and welcome back to episode 5 of Leading Adam. Today, we're going to get comfortable with vulnerability and talk about how that can impact your organization and how that impacts innovation and relationships between teammates. And of course, we're going to leave you with a practical way you can take that into your day.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention in education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com, and I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
We're back for episode 5.
Yes, 5. Isn't that incredible?
I can't believe it.
I know, 5 weeks, it feels like it's only been a week.
That's right. I think it has.
It might have been.
It might have been.
But no one will ever know.
Well, I'm ready for today, and I need to warn you. So I had a case of the hiccups yesterday.
Oh, great.
And you know when you get the hiccups,
Uh-huh.
it's like they come back and they come back.
They do.
I feel like they're a little contagious for maybe a 24-hour period. So
Please, God, let this happen.
it could be wild.
Do you know there is a cure-all for hiccups?
I was curious. What do you do how do you cure the hiccups?
I've never had it not work. I
Okay.
promise you.
Okay.
Just a small, like a teaspoonful of peanut butter
Oh,
instantly takes care of it, and it's done. So,
interesting.
hey, we don't give medical advice,
Right.
so that's not what this is, but it works for me every time.
That's interesting. So I'm not always near peanut butter. I love peanut butter. So I'm going to try that next time. For me, my method of choice, and no medical data backing this up at all, but I breathe in a way that doesn't allow the hiccup to slip through. So I just in, out. And I think it kind of relaxes whatever is going on, and it works usually.
That sounds stressful, and mine comes with
No.
protein. So at least you like peanut butter.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's helpful.
I'm gonna try
Genuinely, it's not a joke. Someone told that to me.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm going to give it a shot because no one's here to make fun of me for doing it.
I like it.
It worked, and I do it every time. And now if I get the hiccups and I'm away from peanut butter, I get a little angry about it. Like I gotta find some peanut butter. Hiccups suck. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to try that next time.
Yeah. You've got your coffee?
Got my coffee in my chicken mug.
In your chicken mug.
Yeah.
All
I think
right.
it might actually be maybe that's a rooster.
Because this is one of
I
your
like
joys in life. Your
It
mug.
is. My mug. It's very important, the mug that I'm drinking the coffee out of. And this one has lots of colors. Chickens I think are hilarious. And I'm not really sure why. But I enjoy this mug a lot.
I mean, chickens can be funny. I can give you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Awesome.
Well, you got your mug, you got your joy in life. You got 2 of them.
Caffeine.
Coffee. And
chicken
a
mug.
mug.
That's
I mean,
right.
that's not technically 2 of the 3 you said, but hey, coffee, again, always good.
Always good, always good. And likewise, you've got your mug. So we're ready to go here. What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to get into talking about vulnerability as one of the elements of the human experience. This is hands down my favorite. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this one.
Same. I think this is going to be a challenge for us today to keep this within our 30-minute time frame. I know it's really important for us to keep these simple and short and sweet.
Yeah.
But this one I'm really excited about. And so prior episodes we've talked about human experience and how important that is to an organization. It's belonging, vulnerability, shared purpose being those foundational elements.
Right. And more importantly, that the human experience is the base for all those other things. Diversity, equity, inclusion, employee engagement, employee satisfaction, productivity, profitability, all of that is built on the human experience, and which is those three things: belonging, vulnerability, shared purpose. And today we get to unpack vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. So we covered belonging in episode 4. So now we're talking about vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've talked about this before. That is something that is it the biggest challenge you think that leaders struggle with, or that struggle with in an organization?
I do, because I think it's largely misunderstood, and I think from a male leader perspective, it's a little bit villainized maybe as weakness. So I do believe that is the case, and across the clients that we've worked with, it is always the low point, and shared purpose is typically the high point in the metrics.
Right.
But it is, I believe, the biggest challenge. But I also believe it's the most simply resolved when it comes to practicality.
Yeah, and we're defining vulnerability as really bringing humanity in the mix of processes, procedures, SOPs. Those things are all really important. But without that human element, without that humanity, that's no good.
Well, our passion being towards education, that is a point where it's going to be easier to make excuses for the absence of vulnerability. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think I've been thinking about this. Last night I was thinking about it, and I know we're going to get around to that point as to why is that the case. And most of it's because education is so highly regulated, and we kind of rest on our laurels, if you will, in that case. But yeah, let's not jump ahead. Let's talk about what vulnerability is. And, we mentioned, I used vulnerability when we were talking in maybe episode 2 or 3, and referenced Brene Brown. And it's a great context to help us understand and process how does organizational vulnerability work, and what's it really comprised of. And Brene Brown really correlates courage and vulnerability as being synonymous.
So much. And it makes me think, a great example just this past week. So within admissions, as if you work in education, so many processes, procedures, accuracy is very important. There's compliance things to think about. It's really important to have all of those things, admissions processes, and be mindful of all of those. And so within that, it's a lot to remember. It's hard. It's a lot to remember. And just this past week, someone on the team, we were in a team huddle, and she's someone who's been there for a while. And she just said, "Hey, I'm going to be really vulnerable for a second and say that I don't feel really comfortable with this. I need help. I'm struggling right now with something." And
Wow.
And she just spoke up and shared that, and I just immediately felt this warmth towards her. Thank you, gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know I was kind of feeling a little unsure about certain things. I'm sure others were feeling a similar way.
Yeah.
And just that connection.
Right.
And just how much trust, and let's all dive in to help each other and help her, help each other. Other people were sharing, yes, I have a question about this. And just, it seemed to just open up the floodgate towards that.
Well, that's the thing about vulnerability, is it produces vulnerability. And roll back to Brene Brown's comment, the courage that it took for her to say, "I'm not comfortable with whatever."
Right.
Those words take courage, and that's why courage and vulnerability are synonymous. Kudos to her.
Right.
I gotta say though, I mean, it's rare that vulnerability is handed to you as a leader, right? Because the opposite of vulnerability is feeling psychologically unsafe.
Right.
And so in this case, I guess I'm curious who was leading the call and how did they respond?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we were on a Zoom call. Our team is fully remote. And so I think it speaks to a lot to the leader to foster this environment where there is a constant, it's a culture of sharing.
Yeah.
It's a culture of saying out loud, this is hard. Things change all the time,
Mm-hmm.
every day. Sometimes, certainly weekly, there are things that change, or, sometimes things that we talked about 2 months ago people forget, right?
Right.
Things like fall to the wayside, and so we have to, there's reminders that need to go out, and so there is our leader, um, within that context, there's a constant reminder that hey, things are hard. We're going to help each other out. This is how we do it. We pull together. We help each other. We support each other. We reach out to each other.
Right.
That's how we reach our goals. That's how we, bring excellence to our work. It's an expectation that happens, and our leader, that leader in that meeting and in that context as well, demonstrates vulnerability herself, and I think it really starts with her, and with the leadership in place, in that, she's willing to admit when she's, hey, this is new to her too. She's sharing it as she gets it. She doesn't really know, so she's,
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go back, because I want to come back to that example, because I think there's two elements there. Number one, it sounds like the person leading the meeting handled it correctly, and I would say to those listening, there is another way to handle it that is even better, which is great. And then, of course, there's multiple ways to handle it that aren't so great. Yeah, but we won't outline all of those. But let's come back to that. But I think it's important for us to talk about why is vulnerability so critical for the organization.
Right.
Right. So it's, number one, we look at it and go, okay, that's all good and well for this employee. She felt like it's okay to learn. It's okay to not know all the answers at this point. But what does that have to do with organizational health? And the reality is that vulnerability in this space to share your ideas, your questions, and your solutions is the bedrock for innovation. And if we look at Jim Collins's work for Good to Great, that was a big piece in this transition from just a good company to a great company, is this ability to innovate. And then to stay at that level is to remain in this state of innovation. And that is relative to both product and process innovation. It's not just, did we create a new thing that's never existed?
Right.
It's, did we adjust the things that we do to improve efficiency and effectiveness? And all of that is part of innovation. The innovation doesn't happen unless those who are in the work feel comfortable enough to ask questions,
right,
offer solutions, challenge decisions. And you can only do that if you feel safe.
Yeah.
That's vulnerability. So that's why it matters. That's why this example is so perfect, because someone is saying, I've got an issue here.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
Yeah. And, just thinking too, like, about the side effect if vulnerability is not present within a team or within an organization, that apathy that sets in, the just feeling the mental health side effects of that. I mean, I imagine, just using that example again, the side effects of everyone, if she had not been brave and courageous to speak up, if that environment was not like that, then how many people would have sat in that meeting feeling like, I'm no good. I don't know. I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on, or I'm the only one that has questions.
Yes.
And just how detrimental that is to performance and the team. And none of those improvements are, even have a chance of coming to light.
Well, you mentioned mental health, Erika, and this is something that the society as a whole is becoming more comfortable with, maybe too comfortable. And I know it's not a popular stance, but I think mental health issues have become a fad. Like, it's cool to have depression.
Oh,
And so in some ways, I think we've taken it too far, right? I struggle with mental health, so I get likes and shares.
mm,
That's not the mental health I'm talking about
mm-hmm,
here, but bringing up mental health in the workforce, you can't avoid talking about stress.
mm-hmm.
And stress is a part of all of our work,
Yeah.
whether our mental health is poor or not. Stress is a part of life in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to a place where I don't feel like I belong, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
that last week, and now I don't feel like I'm safe,
Mm-hmm.
that, mentally, cognitively, emotionally safe, that I can share something or
Mm-hmm.
ask a question that may make me look stupid. All of a sudden I double down on my stress
Mm.
because my mental health is now at risk.
Yeah.
And we have the opportunity as leaders to address this.
Mm-hmm.
If you know your team is asking the question internally, do I matter?
Mm.
You can answer that question for them. And vulnerability and fostering an environment of vulnerability is one way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got something I want to throw out here as an indicator for leaders that you're wondering, what's the level of vulnerability in my team?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one method is to dial up and reach out to 240 Solutions because we measure it. But this isn't that, because there's a more organic way to know.
Mm.
And here's what it is. If in your team meeting, virtual or in person, you ask a question and it's dead quiet, you have a vulnerability issue.
The crickets.
Absolutely. And if you wait long enough, someone will talk. But if you have a healthy organizational vulnerability level, there won't be a long pause of silence, because the team has understood that when you ask a question, you genuinely are seeking their input.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just platitude. And I think that is an absolute easy indicator for any leader, that when you finish talking and you pose a question and nobody talks, you've got a vulnerability problem.
Yeah. That's excellent. And I would even extend that a little, take that a step further. If there's always the same person that speaks up, that's something to look out for as well.
That's a good point, because sometimes the interruption of vulnerability isn't coming from the leader.
Yeah.
Still the leader's fault.
Like there's something that dominates.
Right, because some people are so uncomfortable with silence that they'll make a silly comment, or they'll say something a bit brash. That alone, like if that person's circle of influence is strong enough, can diminish vulnerability in the team.
Yeah.
Still, again, though, the leader can't hold that person responsible, because it's the leader's responsibility to engage that individual and talk through how they can be more of a participant in the team towards the goals that you're trying to achieve, instead of maybe being brash or too silly all the time.
Yeah.
So still, the organizational issues that we discover, they're leadership issues. Every time, 100%. There is no other answer. If you're a leader and you're putting it on your team, or you've got an employee who doesn't pull their weight, that's your fault. Plain and simple. I'll never change my mind on that.
Yeah.
That's the way that it goes. And so here again, all of this comes back to my responsibility as a leader to understand the importance of the human experience, to understand what it's made of, and then how do I lean into it?
Right.
So I'd love to go back to the example you shared. It's such a good one because it's a virtual meeting. Virtual meetings are the easiest ones to check out of. It's harder to see your micro expressions and nonverbals on those tiny little window videos. But
depending on the size of the team, you might not even be able to see everybody.
Right.
You might be on the next screen. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I remember when we went virtual at the institution where we were working, it was not uncommon to have 40, 45 people on a Zoom meeting. And, at that time I was doing, I guess, on average 30 to 35 hours a week on Zoom.
It's a lot of hours.
Yeah, it's a lot of hours. And, this isn't a monologue for virtual meetings and the death of community, but
Right.
there was something that you start learning when you start watching what happens, and you realize, okay, once everybody's signed on, if I kill my camera and turn it back on, it moves me to the second page.
Oh.
And that's where I wanted to be, on the second
Right.
page. It was required to have your video on,
Yes.
but that didn't mean I had to be on the screen they were looking at. And so I think, you learn these ways to hide.
Right, right.
Maybe we shouldn't share those, but
I think a number of people may have just notated
taking
that.
notes. Yeah. For more tips and tricks, let's not do that. But no, back to your example. I think this woman who raised her hand effectively and says, "I'm sorry. I just want to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this. I know what I'm doing, that kind of stuff.
I need help.
I need help." The leader's response, as you described, was great because she leaned into it, expressed empathy, those kinds of things. The best response in those situations is to, number one, validate what they feel. And the leader did that. And then pause and then ask one question with one word. Someone else?
Oh.
Because now you're saying, I see your vulnerability. It's important in our team, and I'm going to give this space for anyone else right now. Let's do this.
I love
Let's
that.
go
It's so
there.
simple. So just asking someone else allows that somewhat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
next
maybe I
person.
think it's the inflection too, and there's two ways to do that with intonation, and it's someone else or it's someone else. And one's more active than the other, right? You have a passive voice and an active voice.
Yeah.
The passive voice is more used, I think, in this context when you're going, okay, we have a short meeting and a big agenda, but I can't just skip past this.
Right.
Your intonation will tell the group how much you're willing to lean into this.
Absolutely.
We don't really recognize how well-versed we've become to intonation and words, right? We think it's just semantics. But I'm telling you, if I were to lean into that conversation and say, someone's going to share.
It's someone else, period. Not someone else, question mark.
Right.
Necessarily. It's
and
that's
it's
a huge
first.
difference. It sounds different.
And it sounds a little bit like, Erika, thank you for sharing that. Someone else.
Yeah.
And someone will go. And they may step through, instead of vulnerability, they may step through empathy to affirmation.
Yeah.
But now you're getting into a place where your community is kind of self-governing, right? It's let us come alongside of you.
Yeah.
So that we do this together. And then when you're ready to turn it back to the meeting, it's just use a different word and say, anyone else? And that indicates in our brain, cognitively, it's time to move on.
Right, right.
But you created space for it, right? And so I told you this was my favorite
Love that.
by far, because to me it is the one that is most practically addressed. But really the trick is getting leaders past themselves, past your agenda, past what you think you need to say, and just trust that the group can get to a place that is going to be productive.
I love that because it's something that's so simple. And I'll add to that as well, as somebody who tends to be a bit more introverted in meetings, especially Zoom meetings. My gears are always turning, and I'm thinking as I'm hearing people speak, and I'm thinking through it in my head. So I'm thinking through it, so I'm slower to the speaking part of it.
Right.
So I have found it to be really helpful when a leader recognizes, Erika, I can tell you're thinking about something over there. What's on your mind? It pulls me out of my head. And so I'm trying to be more aware of that when I'm meeting with others as well, that to look and recognize that those same traits in others, because that person who's often pretty quiet, it's not because they don't have something to say.
Right.
It's because they do. They're just a little maybe slower to the punch than
And I
others.
found those individuals often have the best thing to say. I think we as leaders have that responsibility, and I think it's perfect time for the challenge.
Yes.
Like, you were dead on. This is going to be the one where let's just go another 30 minutes.
Yes.
But we're not going to do that because we're going to keep integrating this through our conversations and whatever those conversations are. But I think it's kind of a two-part challenge here, I think, this time. The first challenge, I think, should go to the leader to say, you should be more observant in your meetings of those who are processing and the words that are being shared in the context of, was that risky? Did that take courage to say, right? That's a better way to think about it. Not, was it personal?
Right.
We don't want to get into that mess.
Yeah, this isn't oversharing.
Yeah, not oversharing, but
Being
relative to the risk of looking incompetent, the risk of looking apathetic. When you hear those, is observe for that and pay more attention to that than your agenda. Don't negate the agenda. Like, don't forsake it. It matters.
Right.
I mean, structured meetings are important.
Yes.
But pay attention to those and then ask, what's going through your head right now? The second part of that challenge, before we get to the other, I think should be being comfortable with silence. Ask a question and be willing to say nothing for at least 60 seconds. Somebody will talk, and chances are they will add value to that meeting. But we're so uncomfortable with silence.
Right.
It sounds more like, okay, any questions? Okay, so let's move on. And you're like, oh, for God's sake, that was 3 seconds. So there's one. So
Yeah, that's good.
I think the last, though, like you gave an example this morning of vulnerability on a silver platter, right? I mean, the person says, I'm going to be vulnerable for a minute. Like, if you miss that as a leader, you should stop leading today, because that's unacceptable. But what if the team isn't? What if you're having trouble seeing it? And I think there's a simple exercise that I would encourage leaders to use, and it can be done very simply. You could Google some images, but if you just bring random images of, I mean, it could be an image of art supplies laying on a table, a bird standing in a tree. Like, I'm talking really random images. Lay them out on the table and just ask the team before you start to choose an image that represents how they're feeling about their week. That's it. Give it 10 minutes, to have that conversation, and that will start opening up vulnerability. And that's more in person. And I'm curious from you have the virtual context.
Yeah,
so
I like
you've been doing this.
It feels like a game or a fun exercise. But there's definitely a purpose behind it.
But how do you do it virtually?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you live in this world for a year.
Right. In a virtual environment, I'd say, you could replicate that same exercise by maybe having the team members find something that's personal to them in their home office space. So, our backgrounds are usually pretty sterile with the approved marketing background, right? Or you're showing your best self with your clean, background or whatnot. So just to pull in something from your home or from,
I love that.
To talk about why is it meaningful for you? Why did you select that object?
Yeah. Use what's around you. Yeah. I love that. Well, there's so much more to say about vulnerability, but man, what a great start. And thanks for bringing an incredible example from your week. Those are great. So
thanks for the talk.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.